It's not even been 10 days since the first episode of BattleBots 2020 and there's already a civil war going on in the subreddit. Like, you cannot have a main event in BattleBots without people just going to war over it. It is a bit mad. So, of course, welcome to the second review of BattleBots 2020, and we were given a very, very interesting fight card for this fight. The first of which was Shatter versus Ghost Raptor, so let's have a look at that fight. Ghost Raptor we haven't seen in 4 years. It's a very experienced robot, made the semi-finals many years ago from an experienced team. It's essentially a spinner on the end of a lifter, and the front, just the whole middle section just lifts up, and I thought the horizontal spinner looked pretty nasty. We saw it in testing many times, and it looked like it had some decent speed and power to it. It's hard to judge how a lifter lifts without actually seeing it lift anything. And in the opposite square, we of course had Shatter, and Shatter is the best looking bot this season, I've decided. And it is of course a hammer, and it has Omni wheels, which allows it to move sideways as well as forwards and backwards. And it is already living up to its name, because it fired the hammer once before the fight actually started, and all of the decals just fell off. So it was already breaking itself before it actually started fighting, but it was only superficial damage. So I was confident in Shatter's abilities here. Of course, the match started, and they just rushed straight out. Both of these robots are very quick, actually. So they rushed straight out, and Shatter, essentially, before the match, they said they were going to fire the hammer straight into the weapon of Ghost Raptor to try and stop it. And they did just that. They fired into Ghost Raptor's weapon, and I think it might have damaged the weapon shaft, because if you look in this picture here, the kind of pole that sticks out the top of Ghost Raptor's weapon is a bit damaged, so that could have been what stopped the weapon. But anyway, after a hit on Shatter, the weapon blade on Ghost Raptor just spinning, leaving it with just its lifter for the rest of the fight. And they were actually doing a decent job at controlling Shatter, who, despite having Omni wheels, was still getting pursued around the arena, and Ghost Raptor was getting around to their sides. They were lifting them over, but this didn't stop Shatter from throwing the hammer at Ghost Raptor several times, just hitting them everywhere, hitting them on the drive pod, hitting them on the lifter, on the spinner, on everything. And eventually, it looks like some of these hammers, once some of these hammer shots started to cause damage, because Ghost Raptor eventually began to slow down, and one of the wedgelets got damaged, and then it, of course, burst into flames. And I'm not actually sure what caused the fire. It's hard to gauge exactly when it happened, because we only saw smoke coming from Ghost Raptor when it was pushing Shatter across the battle box. So that could either be it burnt out its drive motors, which I highly doubt. It looks like Shatter might have hit something in one of the drive pods, and then the fire might have spread. It's really difficult, because it would be weird for both of Ghost Raptor's motors to burn at the same time. It would be weird for them to burn anyway. But it didn't look like it was any damage that Shatter caused, because two fires happened at the same time in the robot. So, in my opinion, it must have been an internal fault on Ghost Raptor somewhere. Whatever it was, once it finished pushing Shatter across the arena, it just ended up in the screws and stopped working. For a moment, it looked like Shatter was pinned against the screws while Ghost Raptor was smoking, but of course, Shatter was able to fire the hammer once and free itself and just wiggle its way out of there. It is a big shame that Ghost Raptor broke down like that. I wasn't expecting them to win, because Shatter is very good at stopping horizontal spinners, it seems, but I expected them to put up more of a fight than that, which is, it's a shame, of course, it's a shame, because Chuck Pitzer, of course, he was persuaded by his friends to bring Ghost Raptor out of retirement, and unfortunately this first fight has just not gone his way. It's a shame, it really is, but I have faith in Ghost Raptor and the team that they can turn this season around. They're going to get all sorts of... Ghost Raptor, every single season, no matter how well it does, it just receives so much, like, abuse. Like, people are like, oh my goodness, it's just, oh, it's terrible, oh, that weapon hits the floor, whatever. But this season especially, when people saw its design, they were not happy with it. I actually quite liked it, but a lot of people didn't seem to like Ghost Raptor, and I fear that a lot of criticism is going to be directed towards it after this fight. It's completely rebuilt, so cut it some slack. It's essentially a new robot. So meanwhile, Shatter, on the other hand, very impressive, very impressive start. It seemed like everything worked that they wanted, that they changed. The team was saying all the upgrades were working perfectly, and Shatter is of course facing Witch Doctor at some point, so The producers must have been impressed with them. Moving on, we had Tracer versus Ribbot, and Tracer is a new machine from Team Chimera. It is 4 wheels, very compact, chunky robot with a very, very powerful vertical disc on the front. It's got a mini-bot with it, not the lift, the one that everyone was expecting, but the undercutter. And it has a saw blade on it, and I'm guessing it was meant to take out the wheels of Ribbot. Ribbot, on the other hand, entered with its undercutter, and an undercutter would probably be the perfect matchup against Tracer, because then it doesn't really give Tracer much to attack on Ribbot unless it gets around the sides, and of course Ribbot is very, very fast. So as long as they had the undercutter pointed at Tracer, Tracer wasn't going to get any hits on them. That's what I thought. Anyway, they rushed out of the battle box, and Ribbot just ran straight into Tracer. The undercutter hit the wedgelets, bent one of them up, and then Tracer managed to take a chunk out of Ribbot's tyre, and Ribbot, of course being a very, very quick machine, just ran away, and the whole tyre just delaminated, just bits of it just flew off everywhere, and it began to bounce around uncontrollably because the undercutter was hitting the floor. Then they circled back in for another hit, and they managed to flip Tracer over in a big impact, and Tracer just could not get back up. And this is a big, big disappointment. A lot of people were saying that Tracer was playing was just a bit stupid for entering the arena without any means of self-righting, but that's not entirely true. They did intend to include a self-righter in their robot, I believe, but the additional weight, it just wouldn't fit onto the robot in time. Of course, Tracer wasn't originally accepted, so the team did have to build it quite quickly, so maybe things had to be, sacrificed and omitted. Another thing is that it looks like it was supposed to be able to drive inverted, but because of last minute changes, the wheels on the back of the robot had to be smaller than they intended, meaning that it couldn't self-right and it couldn't drive upside down either. So Tracer was just left there stranded. Ribbot slaughtered the mini-bot, and Tracer started to catch fire. Presumably, I think that was the motor, the brushless motor that powered the weapon. It's actually designed by Team Chimera. I presume that it started to stall and catch fire. So, unfortunate start for Tracer, but it is a new machine, so again, cut them some slack. It's heavyweight robots are not easy to fight and build, and of course in your first fight there's going to be things that you don't there's going to be things that weren't planned and things that do go wrong, so cut Tracer some slack. And Ribbot, quite impressive display. I think they only used the undercutter once last season against Sharkoprion, I think, and it was quite effective. I'm surprised they didn't use it more last season. Definitely the right choice for this fight. They were able to negate Tracer's weapon very, very well. They just need to be able to protect their tyres more though, because something more reliable than Tracer will expose them for that in the future if they aren't careful. Moving on, we had the first controversial fight of the night. Kraken versus Black Dragon. Black Dragon, of course, the only robot from Brazil this season. A 2-wheel drive robot with a Drisk they entered this fight with, and wedgelets at the front. And Kraken, of course, a pneumatic crusher with a very, very long, narrow wedge at the front. And this is the first time in Kraken's career that having that long wedge has actually made sense to me. It's the perfect counter for vertical spinners like Black Dragon. It can just slide straight between the wedgelets, straight underneath the weapon, and then it can just clamp down onto the weapon belt, and that's exactly what Kraken did to begin this fight. It got straight underneath Black Dragon, whose weapon couldn't actually do anything once they were in that position, and it just started to chomp down on them. Kraken's weapon, surprisingly, only has 12 crushes. I knew it was pneumatic, but I didn't think that it had a limited amount of uses, because I've never ever heard of that happening before for a crusher. It's very strange. And then, of course, when Kraken bit down onto Black Dragon, it didn't actually do any damage to the chassis itself, but it started throwing fire in the face of Black Dragon, which did not help Black Dragon at all. Then, however, Black Dragon realised that their drive power might have been slightly superior to Kraken's, and they were able to push Kraken all over the battle box. Like, people were saying that Kraken had complete control of this match. It really didn't, because Black Dragon was pushing Kraken everywhere. And then when Kraken finally had to let go after 30 seconds, because of the rule that you can't hold a robot for more than 30 seconds, they had to actually shout to the Black Dragon team that reverse, because Black Dragon was still pushing into them, and they wouldn't be released, essentially. So very, very strong drive in Black Dragon that was able to literally go inside another robot and push it all over the place. So, of course, Black Dragon's weapon was also doing a little bits of damage inside the mouth of Kraken. As you can see in this picture, it had a few gouges on the mouth of Kraken, the red part. It also managed to do damage to a teeth, so that when Kraken was rolled over on its back by the force of Black Dragon's weapon, one of the teeth actually fell off, which was a big problem for Kraken because it cost him points in the eyes of the judges, and of course it hindered their capability to damage Black Dragon later on in the fight. They continue to tussle and grip Black Dragon, but it went to the judges, and in the end they scored it on a split decision for Black Dragon. And a lot of people thought that Kraken should have won this fight because it was a control bot and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. I can kind of see your point if you think that, but let's look at the damage categories and stuff, shall we? So the judges can award 5 points for damage, 3 points for aggression, and 3 points for control, I believe, resulting in 11 points in total. So let's go for the first category for damage. I would give that 4 for Black Dragon and 1 for Kraken. The reason being, Black Dragon caused a lot of superficial damage to Kraken, but did also manage to take off a weapon tooth, which hindered Kraken's capabilities to control Black Dragon, as well as damage it. Kraken, of course, gets a point for the damage category because it did manage to take a weapon bolt off Black Dragon, but that didn't actually hinder Black Dragon too much either, so I'd say Black Dragon caused more damage, but neither of them were really hurt by each other, so that one could have gone either way, to be fair. Moving on, we had control, and I would say that would probably go 2-1 for Kraken, because they did get Black Dragon in their weapon and they did push them around. Of course, Black Dragon still gets a control point because it did manage to get Kraken into the screws. That one time it managed to get into the mouth of Kraken and just overpower it, essentially. So that ends up with 5 points for Black Dragon so far and just 3 for Kraken. Moving on to the final category here, which is aggression. I would give that again 2 to Kraken because it was essentially controlling the fight, and then 1 for Black Dragon because it did get weapon hits on there, it was being aggressive. So that results in a 6-point win for Black Dragon and just 5 points for Kraken. So Kraken just about loses this fight in my book. Of course, the judges, one of the judges disagreed with me and voted for Kraken, which is fair enough. You know, this was a really, really close fight. And the thing with close fights is obviously people are going to get upset if their kind of supported robot doesn't win. But the thing is, in close fights, I can't really be mad at the judges because it's a very hard fight to judge, isn't it? It's like Black Dragon could have won that, Kraken could have won that, and there would have been controversy either way. So in my book, Black Dragon wins that just because it wins the categories for me. But great start to the season from Kraken. They've proved that they can take on the meta better than any Crusher we've seen so far, actually, which is why they've been matched up against Witch Doctor. We saw that in the trailer, and that's very sad for Kraken. It is good, but I don't know if it can take on Witch Doctor. Black Dragon scrapes a win against Kraken. I thought this fight was going to go absolutely their way, but they have got some ground to make up, and they have got some work to do because they need to be winning fights more dominantly than that. But a great show from both of these robots, actually. Moving on, we had Mammoth versus Huge, and Mammoth, of course, is a massive 6'4" robot, and it's got a rotary lifter on the front of it. It is like very tough, it's very skeletal. The lifter was very bendy for some reason, I have no idea why. And we had Huge, and it was the Battle of the Titans. Of course they had Huge. Huge is a vertical bar spinner in between two like massive wheels and made of HDPE, and it is a very, very vicious robot. It's very hard to attack, but as is Mammoth. So this is the only fight we've seen where there's a robot that's actually bigger than Huge. So they were getting a taste of their own medicine in this fight. So the fight started and this happened. I pity anyone who watched this as their first fight ever seeing BattleBots, because if you watched this fight and you saw these two robots fighting, you'd think, what the hell is this show? Because Mammoth came out of the box and did this. Can you explain to me what's happening in this picture? What is going on? So Mammoth of course came out and it tried to flip Huge. It ended up doing a front flip, and then Huge also ended up getting flipped over. All kinds of chaos happened. The most notable of this chaos being that Mammoth got underneath Huge, but because of the prongs on the front being kind of bendy, it couldn't actually flip Huge over, and instead actually started doing front flips, just complete front flips. It was incredible to witness. Just this massive robot just go flying through the air and land perfectly without absolutely no worries at all. They were able to actually control Huge very, very well, because Huge is like renowned for taking the fight to its opponents and being very, very difficult to attack, but Mammoth just came out of nowhere and just started bullying it, not giving Huge any space to get up to speed or get a hit. There was a scary moment in the fight for Mammoth where Huge almost got Mammoth's wheel off, but not quite. So Mammoth just carried on bullying Huge into a corner, threw it on top of a pulverizer, before finally getting one of the wheels of Huge stuck outside of the arena. And of course that was game over for Huge. They couldn't recover from that, and Mammoth ended up winning the fight. And wow, this was, honestly, this fight, it was absolutely something. If you saw that on television live, you are so lucky, because that was incredible. That was an incredible fight. Huge, of course, I expected it to win, but I just didn't expect it to lose. I couldn't picture a scenario where Huge lost, but getting its wheel stuck out of the arena, that was a great way to do it from Mammoth. And of course, this doesn't mean that Huge is going to lose its next few fights. In fact, I think it's actually going to win them, because Mammoth is the only robot so far that's out-huged Huge, because it's come up with like a weirder design than Huge, and just overpowered Huge and not given it any space at all, and just been really difficult to attack. So amazing show from Mammoth. In the future, I think that Huge is going to do better than Mammoth, because Huge is more suited to take on the more conventional kind of robots, but Mammoth of course hasn't actually faced a proper vertical spinner other than uppercuts. So it's going to be, I think it might be difficult for them after this, especially after beating Huge. They're going to get put up against a tough opponent randomly. So of course I think that Mammoth might have difficulty making any further than the top 32, but I think that it will get to the top 32 at least, because it is a very competent robot indeed. Huge, of course, is also a very competent robot, but it lost this fight. I have no words. It was really, really good. Moving on, we have Claw Viper versus Hijinx. Claw Viper is of course a control bot, and it is absolutely tiny. It is really, really small. Like, compare it to the logo of the BattleBots on the floor there, it is tiny. It is so small. Of course, it's like a complete control style, grab their opponent, lift them. That's kind of the strategy that Claw Viper's going for. They were going up against Hijinx, and the reason I've used this photo of Hijinx is just to show you how big Hijinx is. The size difference between these robots was absolutely incredible. It was massive. Hijinx just came out of nowhere with their massive undercutter spinner. It's really, really big, and therefore it takes a long time to spin up. Claw Viper is one of the quickest robots in the field, and was straight in there on Hijinx. Literally just rammed into it. They had a lot of confidence in their robot that they could survive the impact. Hijinx of course has a wedgelet on the back, and Claw Viper just went straight over it into the wall, and it was just doing all kinds of stunts and things. Hijinx, it kept on hitting Claw Viper, and it seems like it was slowing down after each hit, because Hijinx of course has a very powerful weapon, but it didn't seem like its drive could keep up with it. Claw Viper they had a lot of faith in their robot. They just kept on ramming into Hijinx with their front kind of wedge, taking it into the wall, waiting until their weapon spun up, and then rushing in order for Hijinx to kind of damage itself, and that was not a bad strategy at all. Of course, Claw Viper had to kind of sacrifice their own weapons for this. They could not really control Hijinx, they could only just ram into it, and eventually Hijinx did actually break down, and that was unfortunate. The weapon was still spinning, but obviously the drive suffered during those impacts, and therefore Claw Viper won. And that was a great victory for Claw Viper. I'm very sad that Hijinx didn't make it to the end of the fight. It's definitely been one of the most hyped up robots of this new 2020 season, and Hijinx of course has a lot to prove, but it is a new robot. Again, fighting heavyweight robots is not easy, so of course a massive horizontal spinner like Hijinx It might have issues, it might have gremlins and stuff that you can only really find and fix through fighting your robot. And Claw Viper put up a great fight and eventually ended up winning, of course. Claw Viper, I'm not confident in it. I have to admit, I am not confident in Claw Viper. It did manage to outlast Hijinx, but it didn't do much in terms of using its weapon and controlling Hijinx, which is what it's designed to do. As you can see in this picture, the lifter on on Claw Viper is very, very damaged indeed. It took a lot of damage from Hijinx. It couldn't lift them, even when it did manage to grab them, it didn't seem to be able to lift them over. And it is, of course, very small. Of course, people talk a lot about, size doesn't really matter when you're in the battle box, it doesn't matter if your opponent's larger than you. It kind of does, in my opinion, because if you're small, like that, then you're more likely to be overpowered by larger robots like Mammoth. If Claw Viper went against Mammoth, there's not a whole lot that it can do. But, I may be wrong, you'll feel free to disagree with that, but I think that small robots like Claw Viper are at a disadvantage because they can be essentially controlled and just people can do anything they want to them. So I don't think Claw Viper is going to go very far. I don't know what to think about Hijinx in terms of how far it's going to go, because if it sorts out its weapon issues and its drive issues and its reliability issues, then of course it could go very far. But of course they need to fix it in order for that to happen, and I hope that they've managed to find the problems with their robots that happened during this fight. So what's going to happen to either of these robots, I have no idea. Let's move on to the next fight now. This fight was, of course, Extinguisher versus Perfect Phoenix. Extinguisher, a modular robot from Florida, a vertical spinner and a hammer interchangeably. This fight they went in with a hammer and a very big anti-horizontal wedge, and they were fighting Perfect Phoenix, which is Brutality from 11 years ago, which was built by Paul Ventimiglia, and then refurbished recently by Ray Billings of the Tombstone team, who is dating the 11-year-old driver's mother, I believe. Perfect Phoenix has seen a lot, let's just put it that way. Moving on, the fight started and Extinguisher just raced out of the red square, straight for Perfect Phoenix, who dodged out of the way and got the weapon up to speed, and Extinguisher, of course, ran into the screws, turned around, and then drove forwards, took a big hit from Perfect Phoenix, and this big hit afterwards, they fired their hammer, and then stopped working after it retracted. So Perfect Phoenix went flying one way and then backed off and kind of just spun the weapon down, and Extinguisher just wasn't moving after that kind of series of events. And personally, I think that it was Extinguisher's hammer that caused it to stop working. I believe a wire connector fell out or something, and that's what caused Extinguisher's drive to stop working, because his hammer was still fine, but the rest of it seemed to just stop. Personally, I think that it was kind of the moment in between the hit from Perfect Phoenix and the hammer retracting that Extinguisher was still fine. It was still moving around. The wheels were still spinning in that kind of split second before the hammer retracted, and then the robot just stopped working. So the wheels were still turning around in different directions, but then the hammer retracted and it stopped. So personally, I think it was the force of the hammer that killed Extinguisher and not Perfect Phoenix, because Perfect Phoenix just kind of glanced off the wedge and went one way while Extinguisher went another. So it could have been anything. Regardless of what it was, Extinguisher stopped moving immediately and died and lost the fight, and I was very, very sad, because obviously I'm a big fan of Extinguisher, but it disappointed me in this fight personally. It is, of course, a very good robot, a very capable robot, and I'm sure that it's going to do great things in its next couple of fights, but for now, I'm just a bit sad that it didn't get to show what it could do, because this was shaping up to be an excellent fight before it stopped working. Perfect Phoenix, on the other hand, again, it's kind of hard to tell if it's adapted to the modern era, because it just glanced off the front wedge of Extinguisher and that was kind of, the fight was over. The driver, Tyler, said that the robot went into the fight as well as it came out, so that's a good sign, I guess, but not a lot happened in that fight. So anyway, Perfect Phoenix picks up its first win and Extinguisher picks up a loss, unfortunately. I was not very happy with this fight, I have to say, but it was followed by an excellent main event, which we're going to talk about now. And that was, of course, Hydra versus Witch Doctor. Hydra is a very, 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 very powerful flipper. It is everyone either hates it or loves it. Some people call it the success of the Bronco, other people call it the death of all good things, but either way, it's still a very, very impressive robot. It was fighting Witch Doctor, and Witch Doctor was a runner-up last season, and it is, of course, a very, very, very powerful machine as well, and this was shaping up to be an excellent main event. Hydra's had problems with durability in the past, so I personally thought the Witch Doctor was going to come out of nowhere, one-shot Hydra, and then just do a victory dance. But no, that's not what happened. Hydra came out into the centre of the arena, sent Witch Doctor to space. Witch Doctor landed, did all sorts of backflips and cartwheels while it landed, self-righted numerous times. Hydra threw it through the air again, threw it into the screws, did this with it, did that with it, basically just bullied it. Then Witch Doctor landed, delivered a huge hit to Hydra, which ripped off basically one side of the wedgelets, carved a hole in the machine, and but Hydra seemed okay after that. And then one more flip from Hydra happened. Witch Doctor's weapon seemed to break a little bit because the robot started to bounce about all over the place, so one of the weapon teeth was definitely broken. And then Hydra started to slow down a bit as well. It seemed like it was having trouble on one of the drive kind of sides. So it continued to flip Witch Doctor, and then Witch Doctor caught fire and just smoke engulfed the arena. Hydra continued to flip Witch Doctor despite the fact that Witch Doctor was on fire and it probably would have died by itself. But it didn't, and therefore Hydra just kept on attacking it, threw it into the screws again, right in front of the judges, and then the screws reversed for Witch Doctor and let it out, which they didn't do for... Which robot was it? Was it Captain Shredderator? They didn't do it for another robot, but they did do it for Witch Doctor, which doesn't seem that fair to me. But anyway, Witch Doctor managed to get out of the screws, and then Hydra went into the blue square and had a lot of trouble. A surprising amount of trouble. Essentially, Hydra just went in there, and one side of the robot didn't seem to be working. It was crab walking. The countdown started on Hydra, and Hydra was being counted out, and it started kind of moving again, and then the count stopped again. I'm not sure that what Hydra was doing would be called this translational movement. I thought the Witch Doctor had the fight at that point, because Hydra didn't seem to me to be moving properly or showing translational movement, because it was either stuck on something or one of the speed controllers was burning out at that point, because there was an inconsistency on the floor that the wedgelets were picking up if you rewatch the clip again, but at the same time it was starting to smoke and one of the speed controllers wasn't working according to the team. But eventually, whatever was wrong with Hydra, the ref saw enough life in it to continue the fight, and Witch Doctor came in, pushed Hydra around a bit, and then the fight ended, and the judges decided on a split decision that it should go to Hydra. Oh my god, Reddit burned to the ground after the result of this fight, because of course Hydra spent the whole fight bullying Witch Doctor, narrowly avoided the countdown that honestly was a bit questionable, and then won the judges' decision despite barely moving at the end. The thing that's important to remember in this fight is that BattleBots, there's a distinct difference in BattleBots between intentional damage to your opponent and then damage your opponent inflicts on itself. Hydra's problems probably weren't inflicted by that hit from Witch Doctor, because after the fight Hydra was able to kind of cool down its speed controller and then drive around okay, according to BattleBots. While Witch Doctor was on fire, it lost the weapon tooth as a result of hitting the floor multiple times, and it eventually caught fire and then lost the judge's decision. And a lot of people were saying that Hydra wasn't showing translational movement and that it should have been counted out, while on the other hand people are saying Hydra was fine. It shouldn't have been counted out, it was still moving across the floor okay, and therefore should have won the judge's decision. I am personally not on the side of either of these machines, because I think there were a number of questionable things on this fight. It was edited in a curious way actually, because of course there was that moment when Witch Doctor got stuck in the screws and the screws reversed when they hadn't done for a robot in the previous episode. I completely forgot who it was. I'm so sorry, but the screws reversed for Witch Doctor and set them free, which they're supposed to do, but you have to keep it consistent. Then, of course, Hydra got stuck in the corner and wasn't moving. And then the countdown started, which was, you know, expected. And then they started moving around a tiny bit on the floor. And then the countdown stopped. That wasn't consistent to me either, because there's been times in the past where robots have been moving a lot more than that and they've been counted out. For example, Copperhead in its fight against Kronos. Hydra was barely moving across the floor but managed to survive the countdown regardless. When it went to the judges, I'd agree that Hydra wins, but I don't think it should have made it to the judges. Personally, I think that Hydra should have been counted out. That was just my opinions on the fight. It won anyway. This is the face of a man who knows he's just killed the BattleBots community, basically, with that decision. I'm joking, you're a great guy. Moving on, BattleBots announced the Bounty Hunters episodes that would be launching on Discovery Plus, and this is another divisive thing that's happened, because 6 of the 20 episodes that we were promised are going to be locked behind a paywall on the Discovery Plus streaming service, and people are saying that this is an unfortunate thing, because obviously we're going to have to pay for more BattleBots. I'm kind of on the fence about it. Obviously I'm not pleased that the 6 episodes that I was promised that I'm not going to be able to watch in the UK, at least not for a long while, but others are saying that, look, it's bringing BattleBots into the new era, because obviously not a lot of people watch TV anymore, according to my friends anyway. Nobody watches TV anymore, but streaming services are looking like the way forward, and the fact that Discovery has put BattleBots into a streaming service has kind of secured its place in the future of television and in entertainment. So I appreciate what Discovery was doing, but I wish that they at least told us that there were only going to be 14 episodes that were for free on television. So mixed feelings about that one. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. Again, there's not been an episode of Modern BattleBots that I haven't enjoyed so far. So that was kind of expected. Thank you very much for watching this review. If you made it this far, thank you very much. Please subscribe and leave a like on the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.